All right. Hey, folks. Welcome to The Reality Check with Charles Butler. We are here in Chicago. Nation that's hanging up the goddamn nation. Looks like we always end up in a rut. Everybody now trying to make it real compared to what. Oh, yeah, we're going to make it real. A little Les McCann and Eddie Harris. Yeah, that was a song back in the 60s and reminds me of being in college and hanging out and just exploring that whole intellectual side. Speaking of intellect, we have a great guest with us today. We're going to talk about the Electoral College. Some people call it the compromise with the southern states so that they could control the government because of slavery. Well, it's interesting. Emily Conrad written a book called Faithless, The Untold Story of the Electoral College. Welcome to the Conrad. How are you?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Charles. I'm doing great.
What made you write this book?
What made me write this book was kind of my own interest in the subject matter. So I remember after the election in 2016, I was reading this article and it said that there were faithless electors. And, you know, I viewed myself as kind of a well-educated person, and I had no idea what a faithless elector was. So I just started researching it online, and the more I researched this topic, the more I became extremely interested. Because in 2016, you had faithless electors on both sides of the aisle. You had Republicans who didn't vote for the Republican candidate, and you had Democrats who didn't vote for the Democratic candidate. And I thought to myself, in a world where everything seems so black and white, everything seems so bipartisan, how do you have the faithless elector phenomenon on both sides of the aisle? So I started just delving into it, and I began to interview the faithless electors of the 2016 Electoral College.
And what did you come up with?
Well, what I came up with was absolutely fascinating. The more I talked to these individuals, the more my concept of the Electoral College really changed. Before, I viewed the Electoral College as kind of this monolithic organization, right? Almost a rubber stamp of sorts. But when you really delve into it, the Electoral College is made up of 538 individuals. And each one of these individuals has their own unique narrative and story. So it's really interesting whenever you start taking a look at what the Electoral College is. And the electors who I spoke with were both Republicans and Democrats. They came from all, levels of socioeconomic situations. And they came from all corners of the country. And it really made me realize that there's so much more to this Electoral College than what just gets thrown out in kind of the news like spin cycle every 4 years.
Right. This is an outgrowth of colonial times, right? And when we had the institution of slavery, and people forget that we had this thing called the 3/5 compromise, which when we talk about this, and this is the interesting thing, you kind of tie all this together, and this is taking place today. The Constitution says that you count all citizens in the country you count all people in the country during the census, whether they're citizens or not, right? So, we've had this, and in those days you could tell, you pretty much, people who were here were legal, right? So, I often wonder, and I'm sure you have too, how did we know how to find the Nazis who landed in New York. How did we know to find these people if we just had open borders and they could just sneak in and blend into America? Because they were white, they were Nazis, they were, Germans, they spoke perfect English and they had all the mannerisms. But how did we find these Nazi spies? I often wonder about that. So moving to today, when we have some people, they've been saying 11 million people in the shadows. I think it's more like 30 million people in the shadows because they've been using 11 million since 1995 when I lived in San Diego. So they're more like 30 million of these shadow people in our country, and people want to count them. The Supreme Court just ruled last week that you have to count people, that the Trump administration could not put citizenship on the census material. I mean, the census material has been out now, 5-6 months? So, hey, it's moot point. But the Electoral College was to include all the people in the country. So when it came to the slaves, they said, well, how do we count them? And, John Adams was their property. They can't vote. They don't have any freedom. They can't pursue the American dream. So why are we counting these persons who are basically property? And the argument during the Constitutional Convention was John Adams said, if you count your property, then I should be able to count my horses and my cows and my furniture and my house as a people too, as a person too. Remember? So I'm sure you ran across that when you were dealing with the background of the Electoral College, but it's an interesting exercise in democracy, one. And I have people who are vehemently opposed to the Electoral College and say we should go with the popular vote. I think the Electoral College serves a great purpose and that it kind of evens things out. But what you're telling me, and I've heard this before when in talking about the Electoral College, is that these people don't necessarily vote the way that the people have voted. They vote the way they want to vote.
Well, and it really comes down to, and I do have some chapters that provide levels of historical context, and I also go into that 3/5 clause inside my book. I really wanted to humanize the Electoral College because we do view it as this monolithic organization, and it's really made up of these 538 individuals. There are a lot of dialogues and a lot of debates going on right now. What did the founders intend with the Electoral College?
Uh-huh.
And you do have changes throughout history. You had the 12th
Right.
Amendment,
Right.
which really made very early on into our nation's history, it made significant changes to the Electoral College.
Yep.
You also had changes such as it's not quite a change, but I mean, you take a look at what happened in 1824. Where
Right.
nobody received a majority of the Electoral
Right.
College votes, and because of that, John Quincy Adams was able to win the presidency in
Right.
a contingency election,
Yep.
and Andrew Jackson lost.
Right.
So
He was mad
historical
about that.
context
He never
is
got over that.
extremely important.
He never got over that. Andrew Jackson never got over that. He was pissed.
It's true. He never got over
never
it.
got over
And
it.
one of the things that happened this past year, and a lot of people were watching it, a lot of people who are interested in studying the Electoral College were watching these two Supreme Court cases.
Uh-huh.
You had Cefello versus Washington, and you had Colorado versus Baca.
Okay.
Now, Cefello versus Washington, this is a faithless elector and suing the state of Washington. Brett Cefello is one of the electors I interview in my book, and also Michael Baca of Colorado versus Baca is another elector I interview in my book.
Okay.
What these two Supreme Court cases were arguing was whether or not laws to bind electors within the states are constitutional or unconstitutional.
Okay.
And whenever the Supreme Court came up with their judgments in July, the Supreme Court decided that state laws to bind electors are not unconstitutional. Now, the challenge that exists is that many
Whoa.
states do not have laws to bind electors.
Exactly.
Yes. So, and in the states that do have laws to bind electors, it might be just a $1,000 fine, and the faithless vote is still counted. So the Electoral College is really difficult to ascertain because every single state has different laws and regulations that say an elector can do this, an elector cannot do this. In some states, electors sign pledges. In other states, they don't. In some states, electors, if they vote faithlessly, will be removed. Now with this new Supreme Court decision. In other states, an elector votes faithlessly, it is considered a legal act.
Yep. It's going to be fun. It's got, with this
It's
election,
going to be really interesting going into 2020.
it is. But I should let you know that I was a Donald Trump supporter early on. Okay, and
Mhm.
I supported Donald Trump like in June of 2015 before he announced that he was running. And my friends all call me crazy. They call me stupid. How could you? I thought you were a smart guy. You come up with this BS, blah, 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 blah. So I had to endure all of those insults. But guess what? I was right. Not only did, as I predicted, Donald Trump would win the nomination, he also won the presidency. And people say, well, how did you know? And I said, well, everywhere that I went, everyone was saying, I like Donald Trump. I mean, he's saying exactly what I think. I wouldn't say it that way. And he may be a little rough around the edges, and, he may feed it to you without any Vaseline, but, or any water. But, hey, I like the guy. He's saying what I believe. So I heard that all over the country. And one experience that quick experience I'm going to share with you. I went to this cider mill, Franklin Cider Mill in Franklin, Michigan, right outside of Detroit. And it's in an upscale, little community, Franklin, Michigan, very upscale, very, something that you would see in a book about America and the way American town should look, white picket fences, very upscale area. So anyway, I'm at this cider mill, and I stopped to get, a jug of cider, apple cider. And I swear to God, every booth that I went to get sausage or crackers or cheese, or people were talking about Donald Trump and how they, really agreed with what he was saying. They kind of, were upset with the way he said it, but I couldn't help but to tell people this dude is, and I was talking to everyone because I'm a talk show guy, right? So I'm talking to people everywhere, and they're like, "Oh my God, he's, I like Trump. He's going to stop." People forget. You know what people forget? They forget that we had thousands of people heading to our border, our southern border, creating mass chaos and a lot of pressure on our systems around the country. And that all stopped when Donald Trump came into office, and he said to Mexico, and I used to live in San Diego. I used to live right down near the border. I used to live near the border, and when Donald Trump told Mexico, "Hey, if you don't stop these people from coming in our country, we'll cut the money off." Guess what? The caravan stopped. But people forget. They quickly forget that we had thousands of what they call unaccompanied minors crashing our border. And then their parents had to come and take it. You can't have minors come to America because guess what? They become wards of the government because they're minors. They can't enter into any contracts. They can't go rent an apartment. They can't go get a job. They can't buy a house. They're minors. So they become wards of what? The U.S. We have, what about the kids on the Southwest side and other poor communities? Why don't we make them wards of America? I know a facility right now that houses almost 1,000 undocumented children here in Chicago. They feed them, they clothe them, they school them, they compete, they grow up in a safe environment, and our children in that same neighborhood are walking to school in a hail of bullets. How crazy is that?
Well, I think a lot of people do forget what happened in 2016. And one of the things that I really focus on in my book is what was happening in the Electoral College in 2016.
Okay.
Because a lot of people, what ends up happening in 2016 is that you have the most faithless electors in one modern presidential cycle than you had almost, in modern history. And this happened on the Democratic side and the Republican side. And I would venture to say perhaps one of the greatest threats to Donald Trump actually becoming president was inside of the Electoral College. You had a lot of movements in which people were actively lobbying Republican electors to change their votes. And I think that a lot of people they kind of forget this, or surely the Republican electors didn't, because you take a look. I mean, these people were bombarded with letters and petitions and emails to the point that their entire email inbox would be full.
But how did people know
A
who they
lot of them
were?
received death
But
threats
but
to
how
change their vote.
but how did people know who they
And
were?
because oh, go ahead.
Emily, how did people know who they were?
Well, this is public information because basically, when people go to vote in November, they're actually not voting for the president. They're voting for electors to vote for the president on their behalf.
Uh-huh.
And in some states, the electors' names are on the ballot. In other states, they are not. But people take a look at the major party candidates and say, "Oh, I'm voting for that person." Well, actually, they're voting for somebody who they believe will vote for that person. They're voting for an elector.
Who they
The electors are public. This is public information, and to be honest, all the electors for 2020, I'm pretty sure, have already been chosen by their respective states. I mean, they already know who they are. It's just that there's a lack of public cognizance about who these people are, and arguably after November, they become the most influential and powerful people in the world.
Okay. I'm looking at electors from Chicago, right? We have 20. And they said, pledge to vote for Hillary Clinton for president and Tim Kaine for vice president. And and it is amazing, all of the people who were pledged ahead of time to vote for Hillary regardless.
Yes, and you take a look, for example, at what happened in Washington State. State, of course, voted Democrat. You had a group of electors who thought to themselves, well, the best way to try to convince Republican electors not to vote for Trump is for us to vote for a Republican candidate. So you have a group of electors out of Washington State who voted for Colin Powell for president. You had a lot of resistance inside the Electoral College to Trump's presidency in 2016, but it wasn't just to Trump's presidency. You also had examples of electors, say in Hawaii and Maine, who were strong Bernie Sanders supporters, and they didn't want to cast their votes for Hillary Clinton. So what you saw in 2016 was you saw really a lot of fracturing of the parties in a way that you hadn't seen before I think, in modern, political
Okay.
history in the United States.
Okay. You mentioned Washington. Emily. And it says here that Clinton received 8 votes. Colin Powell received 3. Faith Spotted Eagle received 1. Kaine received 8 votes. Elizabeth Warren, Susan Collins, Maria Cantrell, Winona LaDuke each received 1 vote for vice president.
Yes.
Oh man,
and that is what happened in Washington in 2016. At the time, Washington didn't have any laws removing electors in the case of a faithless vote. What they had was that they had a $1,000 fine for any elector who decided not to vote for their party's nominee. So every single one of the electors who decided not to vote in the way that they were, the way that they had pledged to do so, were faced with a $1,000 fine.
So,
but that is kind of a negligible amount when you consider the amount of public pressure that they were receiving to vote for Hillary Clinton.
Well, this is a question for you. 2 questions, actually. How do you become an elector? Because I look at here in Illinois, and all of these people are pretty much public officials.
And this is where it gets really interesting, is that every state has a different way of selecting their electors. In the case of the 8 electors that I interviewed, all of them except for one were actually elected by their peers within a caucus or a convention. So if you were a Democrat out of Washington, you were elected by the Washington Democrats. If you were a Republican out of Texas, you were elected by your fellow Texas Republicans. There was only one person that I personally interviewed who was selected directly by their state party leadership. And this is what makes the Electoral College so difficult to really talk about, is that it is remarkably decentralized between states. And even within one state, parties may have different ways in mechanisms inside their bylaws of selecting electors. There's not that much oversight over it. So in some areas, you might know exactly who your electors are because you were at that convention and you voted for them. In other states, it might be totally up to the party chairman.
Interesting. Interesting. So, what do you think? What? How? Okay. So here in Illinois, I don't know how it's done, but it's not done by the people in the state. It's done through the. So how many electors do the Democrats get? How many do the Republicans get? That's my question.
So this goes back to your comment on history in the past. So basically, the way that you can determine the number of your state's electors is by taking the number of representatives that your state has in the House of Representatives, and then adding 2 to that. So it's basically the number of senators and the number of House of Representatives members you have, your representation in Congress. That is the amount of electors that your state has in the Electoral College. This is the way it kind of creates an interesting sort of equation, a balancing equation between larger states and smaller states, larger population states and smaller population states. That's how the number of electors is chosen. Now, in every single state except for 2, you have a winner-take-all system. So it doesn't matter if one candidate wins by 5,000 votes or 50,000 votes. That candidate will get all of the Electoral College votes of that one state. The only 2 exceptions to that are Nebraska and Maine, and they have a district congressional mechanism. So whoever wins the state's popular vote will receive 2 Electoral College votes, and then if one district votes one way and another district votes another way, you can have a split ticket.
Okay.
This is how Barack Obama got an Electoral College vote from Nebraska, and how Donald Trump had gotten an Electoral College vote from Maine.
Okay, so let me propose this to you. You have all of these people out here who talk about the popular vote as if the popular vote in the presidential election actually has some significance. It doesn't. Am I right or wrong?
The rules to winning the presidency are outlined in the Constitution, and that is through the Electoral College.
Through the 270.
So the rules to the game are this: you have to get 270 Electoral College votes to become president. If you do not receive that, even if you just receive the plurality, then it goes into the House of Representatives, and each state is given 1 vote.
Okay. Now, I remember when David Axelrod was running Barack Obama's campaign. And they would say, well, David, how do you expect to win the election? And David would look right into the camera. He'd look him right in the eye. He said, we're just trying to find the fastest way to 270. And the reporters would look, because the media is so stupid today. We have all these morons running around who are supposed to be reporting history and reporting the news. But guess what? They never read history, the news, politics, civics in college. They're just running around pulling stuff out of their behind. I mean, the kind of journalism that's done today, you can tell that these people have never picked up a history book, because basically his history is repeating itself constantly. So, but I'll never forget, David Axelrod said, hey, I'm just trying to find the fastest way to 270. He didn't say we're trying to win this state and so many votes. And no. We're trying to find the fastest way to 270. He didn't elaborate. He just said 270. So if you were so dumb, you didn't understand that the magic number to the presidency is 270, then guess what? It went over your head. And it probably went over a lot of folks' head, because today, even here in Illinois, we had to pass a special law because the Democrats had eliminated civics education out of high school curriculums. They had eliminated civics out of high school curriculums. I had gone to the governor of the state, a guy named Bruce Rauner, and Bruce and I had many conversations about this even before he became governor. I said, we have to educate the populace. I said, I do a show every night, and people are always asking basic civic questions. If I'm a Democrat and I'm voting, do I have to vote Democrat because I'm a Democrat? Do I have to vote for Democrats on the ballot? Can I vote for other candidates? Simple questions like that. Anyway, so this is my proposal to that, or solution, or hypothetical solution to the vote and those who want to go by the popular vote. I say, and think about this for a second, Emily. I say, let's go. If we're going to use the popular vote, let's do it by county. So whoever wins the county wins one vote or one whatever. Okay. And so you tabulate the counties. Every county gets one vote, right? And whoever has the highest number gets the electoral votes, all of them. Okay. So you know what would happen to Democrats? They wouldn't win. They wouldn't win here in Illinois because all of the state is red except for Cook County and small college pockets. The rest of the state's red. Same way in Michigan. You have the Detroit area that's blue. You have Ann Arbor that's blue. You have the UP. There's a small section in the UP that's blue, but the rest of the state, the counties in the state are red. But so they don't want to go there, right?
Well, when I wrote this book, I really don't have an answer to the Electoral College. I think that constitutional scholars, and there have been a lot of solutions proposed, and I don't feel like I'm the one to give that answer. The one thing I will say, though, is that the general public has a vast misunderstanding of what the Electoral College is, and news media, I think, is also pushing forth a very simplified version of what the Electoral College is. In my book, I try to humanize the Electoral College. Who are our electors? How do they become electors? What sort of background do they come from? What are their rights and roles and responsibilities? What if they feel differently than who becomes their party's nominee? And in some cases, people were chosen to become an elector before it was clear that Clinton would win the Democratic primary and Trump would win the Republican primary. These are major questions that we need to be addressing about the Electoral College. And for me, another very important question to be asking about the Electoral College is, we have 538 individuals. And I think that if a bad faith foreign or domestic actor wanted to, they could potentially try to utilize the Electoral College for nefarious reasons. We need to be discussing what this is. And the first way to really be educated in this discussion is to understand what exactly is this Electoral College institution that we have. Without putting in, everybody, whenever I first start talking about the Electoral College, everybody asks me, oh, you like it or you don't like it? And it's one of these things that, this is what we have, and these are the holes that might exist within it, and we need to address these, regardless of what one's opinion is about it. The Electoral College is a political issue. It's a vast importance. But that doesn't mean that we should always make it this partisan issue.
How do I get, let's see, I'm sorry. Jennifer just called me about booking you today, and I jumped right on it. I didn't get a chance to read your books. I'm going to call Jennifer and get her to send me a couple of books, your books, so we can talk about. I can read them and we can talk about them on the air. But this is just fascinating. I love this. I love this topic. I love the fact that you wrote this book. I look forward to reading it, actually. And thank you so much for.
Well, I look forward to you reading it and then giving your thoughts on it, because this is a topic that I think that people need to be discussing.
No question. Hey, question for you.
We need to be having this dialogue.
Okay, I know that the book's on Amazon because I'm looking at it. So, folks, you can go out to Amazon and get the book. It's called Faithless, The Untold Story of the Electoral College. I love it. Hey, look, do you have a website by any chance, Emily?
I do. You can reach me at emilycconrad.com. And I also have a Facebook page for the book. And I sometimes post up interesting articles and that sort of thing. So you can just go to facebook.com/The Faithless Book.
Hey, I would do a Joe Biden, but I'm not. This picture of you is absolutely gorgeous. So that's my Joe Biden piece, right? I mean, but it's a great, besides this picture, this seriously is a great book, a great topic. I'm looking forward to it. I know it's well written from just talking to you. And so I look forward to it. I am just jazzed because this is a great topic, and it's a great conversation to have at this time, especially because of the way the race is lining up. And when you come back, we'll talk about the mail-in ballots and all that other stuff too. So we'll have a lot to talk about. I'm looking forward to it, Emily.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, Charles.
It was a blast. I just want you to know, like I said, this kind of made my day. There are things that make your day when you're a talk show host. This kind of made my day. So thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
All right.
Thank you so much.
You too. Bye-bye. Yeah, man, I'm reading this, looking at this book, and this woman is absolutely stunningly gorgeous. I went out here to Amazon. I'm like, ooh, you look, I went to University of Michigan. So, University of Michigan is a little different than other schools. Our girls were brainiacs. So they weren't the best looking girls, not like Michigan State. But this young lady, not only is she a brainiac, she's seriously good looking. Like Republican women. Republican women tend to be brainiacs and good looking. Real quick, what are we going to do here? I think I know what we're going to do. We are going to play what did I do with that file? I'm trying to come up with this file. Hold on. This is always fun. I got to come up with this file, man. This is a file that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they both use the same Harris-Biden administration line. I laughed so hard. I thought it was hilarious, but it's really not. I mean, because that's really what it's going to be. They know it. We know it. Hello. Oh, man. So look, let's play this little clip with Joe. First Kamala making the mistake of calling it. Well, really, it was not a mistake. That's exactly what it's going to be. Harris Biden ticket, the Harris Biden presidency, because, Joe's going to fade away. Here we go. Let's see what we got. Da-da-da.
What will your administration do to help them give them that chance? Thank you.
Let's move it up here.
Questions about what happened there.
Brett, we are not going to engage. This is straight from the Trump campaign's talking points.
Today it came up again.
Very clearly, the vice.
What came up was Trump, Biden reading from a teleprompter during his press conferences, right? So this is what he
do to help them give them that chance. Thank you.
Let's move it up here.
Last week, the campaign deflected questions about what happened there.
Brett, we are not going to engage. This is straight from the Trump campaign's talking points.
Today it came up again.
Very clearly, the vice president uses a teleprompter. On occasion, you see it as giving a speech.
7 weeks from today, Democrats hope to elect the Biden-Harris ticket. Or is it the other way around?
A Harris administration together with Joe Biden as the president of the United States.
That slip raised eyebrows, but it was made again today by Biden himself.
Harris-Biden administration is going to relaunch that effort.
Whoa. the Harris-Biden administration. I get it. You got it, right? No question. And, other people get it too. It's not a big deal. I mean, I just don't think that Joe's going to win. I don't think he has a snowball's chance in hell's chance of winning. There are a couple of things I want to talk about, but we kind of ran long with Emily. And one of the things is the toxicity of manhood, the toxicity of masculinity. And I say to you guys out there, stop being wimps. Put some bass in your damn voice. Walk around like you got some cojones. And yeah, when you're sitting in a seat, you don't sit with your legs closed like a little girl like Barack Obama. Look at Barack Obama, how he sit with his legs crossed. He crosses his legs just like a little chick because guess what? He likes to wear dresses. They're called saras in Indonesia. But, he was raised by a transgender. Look it up. Man, all this stuff is out there, man. Look it up. It's not Charles Butler making it up. Look it up. This dude tried to change our society with that LGBT craziness. We're going to have LGBT. We're going to have transgenders in the military actively engaged. They're mentally ill, you stupid individual. But that's what happens when you have anti-religion, anti-God-like people in office like Barack Obama. We're dealing with people who cling to their Bibles and their guns. You're damn right. I'm clinging to my Bible and my gun in that order. And keeping my powder dry, Mr. Obama. I don't care what you say. There's nothing that you could say to me like Pete Buttigieg. There's nothing that Pete Buttigieg could ever say to me to make me listen or make me care. This is a guy who sleeps with another dude every night. Why would I care? It's like Lori Lightfoot. She sleeps with another woman every night. I mean, why would I care what she has to say? She's immoral, a degenerate, living a degenerative lifestyle. Sorry. Go forward. Boom. So one of the things I want to talk about today that just blew me out of the water. I saw this story and I said, this is something we have to talk about, something we need to talk about, something. I never heard of this guy, Travis Scott. I'll come back to that in McDonald's. Never heard. I didn't know who the hell he was. This is Travis Scott's meal. Who gives a crap? If it's Dwayne Wade's meal, okay. If it's LeBron James' meal, okay. If it's Derek Jeter's meal, okay. And, if it's one of the golfers' meal, Jason or some of those dudes, okay. But Travis Scott? Who the hell is Travis Scott? I'm still trying to figure that out. Maybe after I read this little blurb, I will. Anyway, what I want to talk about today, though, on the way taking this show to the end, is the fact that the riots over George Floyd could cost insurance companies anywhere between $1 and $2 billion. The most expensive property destruction in the history of the country. So what will that do to our insurance premiums? They'll rise, of course. They have to. Insurance companies are in the business of losing money. So we're talking about the looting, the arson, the vandalism in more than 20 states across this country from May 26th. And this is only to June 8th. We've had more riots and rioting since then. There was more raucous. So that's just for that short time span. And there's a lady who is a spokesman for the group. Her name is Loretta Waters. She said it's not just happening in one city or state, it's all over the country. And she told Axios this. I read the Axios story and I, kind of cringed because, you can't believe what you read in those, in Axios. It's full of fake news and, these young people who don't know up from down, or they may, up is down and down is up to them. And 2 + 2 is 5, and that's okay with Axios, folks. That's what you have to deal with there. But the cost of the damage could surpass. They talk about could surpass. It has surpassed the L.A. riots in '92, when the acquittal of Rodney King cost insurance companies $775 million in insured losses. And today, in today's money, that would be $1.4 billion. But you have to remember that the Koreans burned their own properties. They found numerous insurance fraud cases in Chinatown. These people are like, I can get paid for burning my building down. Then I can rebuild. Oh, okay, boom, set that bad boy on fire. So they had numerous insurance fraud cases in Los Angeles that no one's talking about. I think that's great. Let's see what else. So the violence was sparked, of course, George Floyd having the knee on his neck, that kind of thing. Bad, bad, bad. So other events that have, they talk about the 25 million in insured losses unfolded in Detroit in 67. I was in that riot, right there in that riot, man. 3 blocks from the riot where it started. Or in 1997, when the New York blackout hit, and noted that the standard business owner and homeowners insurance policies cover riot-related damages. Wow. So the cost of this year's riot will reportedly be dwarfed by natural disasters, which hammered different parts of the country. You got Sally that's moving along slowly, and she is creating havoc everywhere she goes. She's only moving at 4 miles an hour, but those winds are still whipping. Generally those things move anywhere between 10 and 15 miles an hour. So she's just beating the heck out of wherever she is because she's moving so slow. Let's see. And they think that these hurricanes are going to cost anywhere from $3 to $5 billion this year. They've already pegged 1.5 billion in losses. The losses from the riots, though, while they seem severe, would not have an impact on the financial stability of the industry, according to Ms. Waters. She said hurricanes, however, have a considerable impact on the insurance industry, as could be the forest fires. The forest fires are horrible, man. They are messing folks up, those forest fires. And finally, Gavin Newsom had to come to the table and say, well, yeah, maybe we should do a better job of forest management. Maybe we should do a better. Mr. President, meanwhile, Mr. President, send us that money. Wow. Wow. Anyway, a lot's going on. In fact, in Lancaster, with these rioters and this money. In Lancaster, this judge, he set bails at $1 million for these anarchists. $1 million. So if you set a bail at $1 million, that means you need at least $100,000 to get out of jail. You need $100,000 in some asset to give to the bailsman to get out of jail. And excuse me, that could be your house, that could be gold, that could be a number of things. Speaking of gold, man, I got some great suggestions on gold. So she went from sorority house to the big house, this one young lady. And she's with the Kappa Delta sorority, KD. And she talks about they're an ally of a Black organization at a pricey private college that she attends. So this young lady, Kathleen Patterson, was among 13 people arrested just this past Monday on a slew of felony and misdemeanor charges, including arson, riot, vandalism, and criminal conspiracy. This criminal conspiracy thing is getting ready to get blow up because the Justice Department is using or thinking about using sedition as a pretext to arresting people. Now, this Sedition Act, when they use that Sedition Act, man, it is a monster, and I'll tell you why. They can pretty much lock you up for most things. They can lock you up for almost anything. So sedition is nothing to play around with. This act is really draconian and can be used to take you out. Do you hear me? So Barr is considering using the Sedition Act to go after protesters. In Seattle, Portland, and places where these people are not peacefully protesting. They're talking about they're going to control the city and stuff like that. Establish a police-free protest zone. Yeah, right. Man, it's crazy. It's crazy. But the Justice Department is reviewing using the Sedition Act, and they're not really talking about it, which is good. The executive branch, they said, has virtually unchecked discretion in deciding whether to prosecute these cases, not to mention Durkin or the sedition statute. Wow. See, I mention this often that, and I mentioned it very, very often, that President Woodrow Wilson incarcerated 125,000 American citizens using the Sedition Act of 1919. True story. Go look it up. Why don't we talk about it? How come, Mr. Butler, how come I don't know about that? Well, you have to be a student. You have to understand that nothing is what it seems when you're doing history, when you're doing research. But it's a Sedition Act of 1918. And they locked up American citizens. And they enacted this during World War II, and they made it a crime to willfully utter, print, write, or publish any disloyal, profane, scurrilous, or abusive language about the form of government of the United States, or to willingly urge, incite, advocate any curtailment of the production of things for war. Oh man, you can't make this stuff up, man. Things necessarily essential to the prosecution of the war. So what did the Sedition Act do? It shut down people's First Amendment rights. A Democrat did that. Woodrow Wilson, one of the most racist, overtly racist presidents we ever had. Democrat. I can't stand Democrats. Anyway, it's a true story, man. That's what they did. So, it's fitting, and I think fittingly, that we as Americans pay attention to the Sedition Act of 2020 and what's going on, because these young folks are facing, this one lady in her group, about 20 people, facing bail bonds of $1 million. So her dad is crazy. He's going crazy because, his daughter's with, Kappa Delta, all these fine girls at Kappa Delta, giving y'all a shout out. I used to date a couple of women who were KDs. But those were the days, my friend, I thought would never end. But the KDs. So she and her father, this young lady's father, Catherine, is trying to get them off. And I hope that he does. But he probably, the judge is going to reconsider. But I'm sure the judge wanted to send a message to these young people that you can't go around committing arson, committing anarchy, and expect to get away. So she, this is a nice little girl too, man. She said, but they better watch out. She may bring a black guy home. Oh boy. I can remember that feeling. Ooh. And there was a song that was written about that feeling, going home with a young white woman. And it was sung by Archie Bell and the Dwells. I remember it like it was yesterday. This young lady, she put out on her Facebook, she was marching in all black with the caption, Black Lives Matters, all day, every day. Thank you. Appreciate that, baby. Appreciate that. 9 of them, including 20-year-old Miss Patterson, is still being held on $1 million bond. I hope she gets out. I think that's a little harsh, but so I don't know. They said she was then charged with guns, along with the police, along with another person from her activist group. She's being held under false charges, and all witnesses protest. She was denied her family lawyer and charged with a $1 million bail that is direct violation of her 8th Amendment right. Reasonable, has to be reasonable. Wow. Going to be interesting. That's all I can say. But they were protesting this guy who was shot. He was wielding a knife. Dude, put the knife down. I don't know, man. That's a tough one. I know if a guy came at me with a knife, I'd probably be inclined to shoot him too. Hey, I'm just saying. Uh-oh. We're gone. We're out of here. The show is over. Want to thank you guys for being with me, for being patient. And we'll be back again tomorrow. Yeah, we will. And let me get out of here. And we'll be back tomorrow doing our thing here at Red State Talk Radio. Let's see here. Let's see. So we covered most things. I didn't get around to the Confederate schools, the schools named after Confederates. That's going to be interesting. So we'll see. Dun, dun, dun. A little set in town to wake you up, push you around, throw you down. We'll be back tomorrow.